Get out of my house. My father's voice shook the walls. You disgusting leech. You're 22 years old, and you've never done a single thing worth being proud of. My mother pointed toward the front door with absolute disgust. You're a parasite. A burden. You suck the life out of this family. We should have thrown you out years ago. I just need a little more time, I pleaded. No, my father roared. You've had enough time. You're nothing but a pathetic failure. He yanked the front door open, and a blast of freezing winter air crashed into my face. Snow swirled through the doorway as he glared at me with nothing but contempt. You want another chance? He sneered. Go earn one. The next second, he shoved me outside with nothing but the clothes on my back. No money. No phone. No coat. No family. The door slammed shut so hard the windows rattled. I stood there trembling in the freezing snow, staring at the house where I'd grown up, realizing the people who were supposed to love me had decided I wasn't worth saving. That was the last time they ever saw me. Or at least, that's what they believed. 5 years later, I walked into the grand ballroom of the Plaza Hotel. Golden light spilled from towering crystal chandeliers onto polished marble floors. The air carried the fragrance of imported white lilies, expensive perfume, and gourmet cuisine while waiters in crisp white gloves moved gracefully between tables draped in flawless silk. Politicians, judges, senior attorneys, and corporate executives filled the room, raising their glasses to celebrate my younger sister's lavish law school graduation. To everyone else, it was the perfect family celebration. To me, it was the night the past finally came to collect its debt. No one recognized me. Not my father. Not my mother. Not even my sister. In their eyes, I was still the worthless failure they had thrown into the snow 5 years earlier. Then everything changed. My sister's boss, the legendary managing partner whose recommendation could determine the course of her entire legal career, looked across the ballroom. The moment his eyes landed on me, his expression shifted. Surprise. Recognition. Respect. Without saying a word to anyone else, he walked straight toward me. Conversation slowed. Laughter faded. One by one, heads turned to watch. By the time he stopped in front of me, the entire ballroom had fallen into an uneasy silence. He smiled, extended his hand, and asked, "How do you know her?" I looked at him. Then I slowly turned toward my family. The color drained from their faces. My mother's eyes widened. My father's jaw tightened. My sister's confident smile disappeared as panic quietly settled in. They had absolutely no idea who I had become. I met his eyes, shook his hand, and answered in a calm voice. You have no idea. Those 4 words shattered the illusion they had spent 5 years believing. And what happened next destroyed everything they thought they owned. This was my sister Sutton's law school graduation party. Or, more accurately, it was a coronation. It was a meticulously staged, obscenely expensive theatrical performance funded by my parents to show the elite circles of our city that the Vance family was flawless, wildly successful, and undeniably superior to everyone else. And I, the family ghost, the dark stain on their perfect, curated tapestry, was standing right in the dead center of it all. 5 years is a very strange, deceptive measurement of time. It is a period long enough to crawl your way out of the absolute darkest, deepest pit of despair and build an impenetrable fortress around yourself. But it is also short enough that the searing sting of a mother's contempt and a father's hatred can still feel fresh against your skin if the wind blows the wrong way. I was wearing a black, custom-tailored suit. It wasn't flashy or covered in obvious designer logos like the clothes swirling around me. It was a quiet, dangerous kind of luxury. The cut and the fabric whispered of a world, a level of power, and a tax bracket my family desperately pretended to belong to, but couldn't actually afford in their wildest dreams. I took a slow, measured sip of my sparkling water. Suddenly, a young waiter carrying a heavy silver tray of champagne flutes backed up without looking, his heel catching violently on the thick edge of an oriental rug. The tray tipped wildly toward me, crystal glasses teetering on the edge of disaster. Without a flinch, without even a spike in my heart rate, my hand shot out. I caught the edge of the heavy silver tray, stabilizing it with a grip like iron before a single drop of champagne could spill onto the floor. The waiter gasped, his face draining of color, and began apologizing profusely, bracing for the kind of verbal abuse people in this room usually hurled at the help. I just gave him a tight, reassuring nod and let go. Surviving on the brutal, unforgiving streets gives you reflexes. It burns away your hesitation and teaches you exactly how to brace for impact. My cold eyes scanned the crowded room and finally landed on them. My father, Gideon, was holding court near a massive, ridiculous ice sculpture carved into the shape of the scales of justice. His booming, theatrical voice cut through the soft, live jazz playing in the background. He was laughing a loud, manufactured, booming sound that used to make my stomach turn into knots, but now just made me feel a profound sense of pity. Next to him stood my mother, Cressida, draped in an emerald green silk gown that probably cost more than a car. Her smile was tight, stretched thin, perfectly practiced as she nodded along to whatever grandiose lie my father was currently spinning to a group of bored investors. And then, there was Sutton, the golden child. She stood radiant in a fitted, custom white dress, clutching a crystal glass of champagne, accepting congratulations from the guests as if she had just personally cured a global pandemic, instead of merely scraping by on C-minuses at a mid-tier, overpriced law school. To understand exactly why I was standing here, holding a glass of water while my pulse beat a steady, cold, unshakable rhythm, you have to understand the museum of pain I was raised in. Our house in the wealthy suburbs of Connecticut was never a home. It was a shrine, a monument dedicated exclusively to the glory of Sutton Vance. The main hallway of our house was quite literally plastered with her achievements. Her debate team ribbons, her piano recital certificates, her perfectly framed college acceptance letters, her pristine report cards. I was the invisible child, the designated scapegoat. I didn't want to be a cutthroat corporate lawyer like my father demanded. I didn't care about elite country club memberships, networking galas, or designer handbags. I cared about code. I cared about operating systems, complex networks, and the beautiful, unforgiving, logical architecture of the digital world. I spent my teenage years huddled under my blankets with a cheap, battery-powered flashlight and a battered, second-hand laptop, teaching myself programming languages while my family slept in their luxurious bedrooms. I clearly remember the day I foolishly thought I had finally made them proud. I was 17 years old. I had spent 8 grueling months, working through weekends and holidays, writing a complex, open-source antivirus algorithm. It was elegant, incredibly efficient, and completely self-taught. A major, highly respected tech magazine had somehow caught wind of my project on a developer forum and decided to feature my code in a 2-page spread, calling me a young cybersecurity prodigy to watch in the coming decade. When that glossy magazine arrived in the mail, my hands were shaking so hard I could barely tear the plastic off. I ran into the massive, marble-countered kitchen, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird, desperate for just a fraction of the warmth and validation they showered on Sutton every single day. My mother was standing at the kitchen island, meticulously wiping down the immaculate marble. Sutton was sitting on a high stool, loudly complaining about a broken fingernail and demanding a spa day. I held up the magazine, my voice cracking, breathless with pure excitement. "Mom, look. I made it into the magazine. They actually published my algorithm. They said I'm a prodigy." Cressida didn't even look up from her cleaning. At that exact moment, Sutton dramatically sighed, throwing her hands up, and knocked her large, iced coffee over. The cup shattered, spilling a massive, dark brown puddle of sticky liquid across the pristine white marble. My mother clicked her tongue in severe annoyance. Without missing a beat, she reached over, snatched the tech magazine right out of my trembling hands, and tossed it face down onto the spilled coffee to soak up the mess. "That's nice, Maeve," she muttered dismissively, not even glancing at the pages as my hard work, my pride, and my entire identity dissolved into a soggy, brown, ruined lump of paper. "Get a towel from the pantry, would you? Don't just stand there staring." My father walked into the kitchen just then, adjusting his expensive silk tie. He looked at the ruined, coffee-soaked magazine on the counter, then looked at me with an expression of pure, unadulterated disgust. "Video games and computer tricks won't pay a mortgage, Maeve," he sneered, his voice dripping with absolute venom. "You need to grow up. Stop embarrassing this family with your useless, childish hobbies. You will go to law school, and you will make something of yourself, or you will be absolutely nothing." I stood there, paralyzed, watching the ink literally bleed off the pages of my greatest achievement, realizing with terrifying clarity that to them, I wasn't a human being. I was a prop. A defective piece of merchandise that was failing to hit its assigned marks. But as I stood here tonight in the Plaza Hotel, feeling the heavy, cold, reassuring weight of a forensic-grade digital audio recorder resting in the inner pocket of my tailored suit jacket, that old memory didn't hurt anymore. It didn't make me want to cry. It just fueled the raging, calculated fire inside my chest. I watched my father step up to the microphone, raising his glass, preparing to give a speech. He was about to tell a room full of powerful people how perfect and united his family was. But to understand the absolute, earth-shattering devastation I was about to unleash on them, you have to go back to the night they finally murdered my spirit and kicked the corpse out into a blizzard. 5 years ago, the Vance household was a volatile powder keg of resentment, and I was the one holding the lit match. I was 22 years old, suffocating daily under the crushing, impossible weight of my father's expectations. He had forcibly enrolled me into a brutal pre-law program at a rigid, soulless, hyper-competitive university. Every single day felt like a grueling prison sentence. I sat in massive lecture halls, listening to wealthy professors drone on about corporate compliance, tax loopholes, and tort law, staring blankly at the whiteboard while my mind secretly built firewalls, compiled complex code, and hunted for network vulnerabilities. I simply couldn't take it anymore. The pressure was cracking my mind in half. I took the small, restrictive allowance they gave me for heavy law textbooks and secretly used it to enroll in an advanced, high-level corporate cybersecurity certification program online. It was a grueling, intensely difficult course. It required me to make a terrifying choice. I had to skip my final constitutional law midterm in order to participate in a mandatory 72-hour global hackathon that served as the final exam for the cyber certification. I locked myself in my dorm room, fueled by cheap energy drinks and pure adrenaline. I won the hackathon. Out of thousands of global competitors, my defensive architecture placed first. I secured my master-level certification. For those 3 glorious days, I felt truly alive. I felt like I had a real purpose, a tangible future that belonged to me and not to the phantom, lawyer version of myself my parents demanded to see. But reality in the Vance family had a cruel, rapid way of catching up. The university's automated academic system sent my probation notice directly to my father's monitored email account. I had officially failed the semester. I was being kicked out of the pre-law program. The final, catastrophic confrontation happened in his private study at the house. The room always smelled heavily of expensive aged scotch, cigar smoke, and old leather. It was a room specifically designed by an interior decorator to make anyone standing in it feel incredibly small and insignificant. Gideon was sitting behind his massive, imposing oak desk, his face a terrifying, twitching mask of barely contained rage. Cressida stood rigidly by the tall window, her arms tightly crossed over her chest, her eyes practically vibrating with sheer malice and disappointment. Sutton was lounging comfortably on the vintage leather sofa, mindlessly scrolling through her phone with a smug, knowing, sickeningly superior little smirk playing on her lips. "Explain this immediately," my father demanded, his voice a low, dangerous, rumbling growl as he violently threw a printed copy of my failed transcript onto the center of the desk. I took a deep, shaky breath, digging my fingernails into my palms to keep my hands from trembling. "I can't do it, Dad. I hate law. I'm not meant for it. It makes me miserable." But I didn't waste the semester. I got my advanced cybersecurity certification instead. I won a global competition against professionals. I have a real, highly sought-after skill now, something I can actually build a massive career on. I can protect corporate networks." His fist slammed into the solid oak desk with such explosive, sudden violence that the heavy crystal ashtray rattled and almost fell off the edge. "You have absolutely nothing," he roared, standing up so fast his heavy leather chair crashed into the bookshelf behind him. His face was turning a dangerous, mottled shade of purple. "You are a profound failure. A lazy, ungrateful, stupid failure. We gave you every conceivable opportunity, we paid for elite schooling, and you throw it all away for some glorified, pathetic typing course?" Sutton didn't even bother to look up from her glowing phone screen. She just casually flipped her perfectly styled blonde hair over her expensive cashmere shoulder. "Honestly, Maeve, you're just deliberately draining Mom and Dad's bank accounts so you can sit around and play pretend hacker in your dark bedroom. It's truly pathetic. You're bleeding them dry with your laziness." I spun around to face her, the injustice of it all finally snapping my restraint. "I haven't asked them for a single dime for anything other than school. You literally just bought a $3,000 designer handbag on Dad's black credit card last week. You failed 2 classes last year and they bought you a car to cheer you up. Don't you dare speak to your sister that way." Cressida shrieked, stepping forward, her eyes wide with unhinged fury. "Sutton is going to be a senior partner at a top-tier law firm one day. She is building a valuable network of powerful people. She is an investment. You are a parasite. You are a disgusting leech sucking the life and the joy out of this entire family." The words hit me like a physical, brutal blow to the stomach. A disgusting leech. Gideon marched around the desk. He walked purposefully over to where my old, battered, sticker-covered laptop was resting on a side table. My entire life, my entire identity, was on that hard drive. My encrypted codes, my winning algorithms, my entire professional portfolio. He picked it up with one large hand. "Dad, no, please don't," I begged, my voice breaking as I took a desperate step forward, reaching out. He looked me dead in the eye. And with a terrifying, deliberate, icy calmness that was far worse than his shouting, he raised the laptop high above his head and smashed it down onto the sharp, hard edge of the heavy oak desk. The loud, sickening crack of the plastic casing and the shatter of the glass screen sounded exactly like a gunshot in the quiet room. My heart completely stopped. He threw the shattered, destroyed remains onto the hardwood floor right at my feet, kicking the broken screen away. "You are no daughter of mine," he spat, his voice completely devoid of any warmth, any love, any shred of humanity. "You are cut off. You are done. I want you out of my house. Now. Leave the keys to the car, the title is in my name." I looked at my mother, desperately searching her cold face for just a microscopic shred of maternal instinct, a plea for mercy. She just turned her back to me, staring out the window into the dark yard. Sutton finally looked up from her phone, a deeply satisfied, victorious gleam in her cold blue eyes. "They didn't just kick me out. They systematically made sure it would destroy me. They gave me exactly 10 minutes to pack a single, medium-sized suitcase, hovering over me to ensure I didn't take anything they deemed theirs." I walked out of the massive front door of that sprawling suburban mansion and stepped directly into a brutal, unforgiving, blinding winter blizzard. The freezing wind cut through my thin denim jacket like a jagged razor blade. The heavy wooden door slammed shut behind me with a thunderous thud, and I heard the heavy deadbolt click into place. The finality of that metallic sound echoed deep in my bones. I stood alone in the massive driveway, the snow rapidly piling up on my cheap boots, clutching a suitcase full of sweaters and a heart that had been completely shattered into a million jagged, bleeding pieces. I had exactly $14 in my pocket. I had no college degree, no computer, no phone plan, and absolutely no family. I walked for 2 agonizing, freezing miles in the blinding snow, my tears freezing on my cheeks, until I finally found a dingy, brightly lit 24-hour diner just off the highway. I walked in, shivering uncontrollably, and sat in a sticky vinyl booth in the very back. I nursed a single, terrible cup of black coffee for 6 hours, watching the snow bury the world outside through the greasy window. I cried quietly until my chest physically ached and I couldn't breathe. I believed them. In that dark, freezing, lonely night, I truly, deeply believed I was a worthless, disgusting leech who deserved to freeze. I walked out into the snow with $14, genuinely thinking my life was completely over. But what I didn't know then, what I couldn't possibly fathom in that diner, was that their breathtaking cruelty was the greatest, most valuable gift they could have ever given me. It was the master key to an empire. If you are watching this video right now and you have ever been tossed aside, humiliated, or abandoned by the very people who were supposed to love and protect you, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment down below with the city you are watching from. Every single comment helps this video reach someone who might desperately need to hear that simply surviving and succeeding is the most devastating revenge possible. Thank you so much. Now, let me tell you exactly how I crawled out of the gutter. The descent into absolute, grinding poverty is terrifyingly fast. When you have no safety net, no family to call for a quick loan, you don't just fall, you plummet at terminal velocity. The first few months were a terrifying blur of freezing cold nights, gnawing, painful hunger, and a bone-deep, spiritual exhaustion that never, ever went away. I bounced from sleeping in cheap, dangerous motels to eventually sleeping on the hard linoleum floor of a crowded, noisy women's shelter downtown. I learned how to stretch $14. I learned to calculate the exact, maximum nutritional value of a 99-cent pack of generic instant noodles. Eventually, desperate for any income that didn't require a background check or a degree, I landed a brutal night shift job at a massive, 24-hour commercial truck wash located on the desolate outskirts of the city. It was gruesome, backbreaking, soul-crushing work. I spent 12 agonizing hours a day, from sunset to sunrise, blasting thick mud, road salt, and toxic grease off the massive sides of 18-wheelers with a heavy, violently kicking high-pressure hose. My hands were constantly cracked, bleeding, and permanently stained black with industrial cleaning chemicals. I lived in a state of permanent, walking exhaustion. There were lonely, freezing nights where I would slump onto a broken plastic chair in the damp, moldy break room, staring at my raw, ruined, blistered hands, and the cruel voice of my father would echo loudly in my head. A failure. A leech. You will be absolutely nothing. I fought a brutal, daily psychological war against my own mind just to keep from believing his curse. But I stubbornly refused to die in that truck wash. I hoarded every single penny I earned. I ate discarded food. After 3 months, I finally bought a cheap, incredibly slow, refurbished laptop from a shady pawn shop. During my meager 15-minute breaks, smelling intensely of diesel fuel and dirty wash water, I would huddle in the corner, connect to the truck stop's incredibly spotty Wi-Fi and code. I relentlessly kept my cybersecurity skills sharp. I read dense security bulletins. I studied the ever-evolving, complex landscape of global cyber threats. I was a ghost in the machine, practicing for a war I wasn't even in yet. Then, one torrential, rainy Tuesday morning at 3 a.m., the universe finally blinked. A heavy, matte black, heavily modified Jeep Wrangler pulled aggressively into my wash bay. The driver was a tall, rugged, intimidating man in his late 50s with sharp, intensely observant gray eyes. He looked completely out of place at a dirty truck wash in the middle of the night. He stepped out of the vehicle, ignoring the pouring rain, holding an incredibly thick stack of printed, highly complex network schematics. He looked deeply, intensely frustrated, muttering curses under his breath. Suddenly, a massive gust of wind whipped through the open bay, catching the stack of papers and violently scattering them across the wet, greasy concrete floor. Reflexively, my survival instincts kicking in, I dropped my heavy pressure hose and scrambled across the wet floor to help him gather the critical documents before the dirty chemical water completely ruined the ink. As I picked up a specific page detailing a complex corporate server architecture, my trained eyes automatically scanned the lines of code. It was an intricate, highly expensive corporate firewall setup. Without thinking, the dormant, brilliant hacker inside me spoke up. "Your ingress filtering on the secondary node is fundamentally flawed," I said, my voice hoarse and raspy from weeks of barely speaking to anyone. The man abruptly stopped gathering papers. He slowly stood up and looked at me, a scrawny, exhausted girl covered head to toe in black grease and mud, holding a dripping high-pressure hose. "Excuse me?" he asked, raising a thick eyebrow in disbelief. I pointed a stained, cracked finger at a specific, deeply buried line of code on the wet paper in my hand. "Right there. You have an open, unmonitored port configuration for a piece of legacy software, probably an old HR database. But you haven't sandboxed it from the main network. A moderately skilled attacker could completely bypass your $1 million main firewall entirely by simply spoofing an internal IP address and tunneling straight through that forgotten legacy port. It's a massive, gaping backdoor. Your entire system is vulnerable." The man stared intently at the paper. Then he stared at me. The heavy rain pounded on the metal roof above us. The silence stretched for a long, incredibly tense moment. "What is your name?" he finally asked, his voice suddenly very quiet and very serious. "Maeve," I mumbled, suddenly feeling intensely self-conscious of my filthy uniform and smell. "I'm Callum," he said. He didn't care about the mud or the grease. He reached out his large hand and shook my dirty hand firmly. "I spent 25 years in elite military cyber intelligence, and I've been staring at this exact architecture for 3 agonizing days trying to find the vulnerability a red team penetration testing group warned me about. You found it in 3 seconds while washing a truck in the dark. What the hell are you doing working here?" I looked down at my heavy rubber boots. "Just trying to survive the winter." Callum didn't offer me pity, and he didn't ask about my trauma. He offered me a lifeline. He ran a small, elite boutique cybersecurity consulting firm. He desperately needed an analyst who didn't just read textbooks, but who actually thought like an apex predator. He hired me the very next day. The pay wasn't much to start, just enough to rent a tiny studio apartment, but to me, it was an absolute, life-changing fortune. Working with Callum was like breathing pure oxygen after drowning for months. We operated out of a tiny, cramped, windowless office above a noisy dry cleaner, but to me, it was paradise. He taught me the ruthless business side of corporate security, the psychology of corporate espionage, and the art of high-stakes negotiations. I brought raw, unfiltered, terrifyingly fast technical brilliance. I built highly aggressive defensive algorithms that actually learned and adapted to new threats in real time. Together, after a year of grinding, we officially founded our own firm, Aegis Protocol. We absolutely did not sleep. We hunted for lucrative contracts like starving wolves. We took on the desperate, complex jobs the massive corporate firms thought were too small or too difficult, and we executed them with terrifying flawlessness. I poured every single ounce of my simmering rage, my deep childhood trauma, and my desperate need for security into my work. I didn't want to just succeed. I wanted to build an impenetrable, towering financial fortress so high that no one, especially not Gideon or Cressida Vance, could ever look down on me again. It took 5 years of relentless, agonizing, blood, sweat, and tears hard work. But the con numbers were shocking. We went from a tiny office above a dry cleaner pulling in scraps to a sleek, glass-walled, multi-floor headquarters in the city's premier tech district. Aegis Protocol rapidly became the absolute go-to firm for elite corporate data protection on the East Coast. My proprietary algorithms were patented and highly sought after. The frightened, broken girl who was thrown into the snow with $14 was completely dead. In her place stood the ruthless CEO of a cybersecurity company currently pulling in over $30 million in annual revenue. I owned a sprawling penthouse overlooking the skyline. I wore bespoke, tailored suits. I had a staff of 50 brilliant engineers. But much more importantly than the money, I had peace. The Vance family was just a distant, fading nightmare I had finally, thankfully woken up from. Until one Tuesday morning, my heavily encrypted, highly secure private inbox dinged with a new, unread message. I opened it, and the cold, bony ghost of my past reached out through the screen and grabbed me violently by the throat. What exactly do you do when the very monsters you escaped suddenly invite you back into their lair? The email that shattered my hard-won peace was from Ainsley, my older, incredibly obnoxious cousin. She was the ultimate textbook flying monkey for my parents, a shallow, vapid woman who had built her entire pathetic personality and social standing around aggressively sucking up to Gideon and Cressida. The subject line read, with a sickeningly aggressive cheerfulness, "Sutton's big day. You're invited." I sat frozen in my ergonomic leather chair, staring at the high-definition monitor, my heart doing a slow, heavy, painful roll in my chest. For 5 long, agonizing years, they had treated me like I was rotting in a grave. Not a single phone call, not a text message, not a cheap birthday card, not even a message through extended family to see if I was alive or dead in a ditch. Absolute, deafening silence. And now, completely out of nowhere, an ornate digital invitation to a massive, expensive gala celebrating Sutton finally graduating from law school and miraculously landing a junior associate position at a prestigious city firm. The body of the email was absolutely dripping with Ainsley's signature, toxic condescension. "Hi, Maeve. We know you've probably been struggling terribly out there on your own, but Uncle Gideon and Aunt Cressida have huge, forgiving hearts. They want you there to witness Sutton's incredible, well-deserved success. Please try to dress appropriately for a high-class event. Let us know if you need bus fare." My initial, visceral reaction was pure, unadulterated rage. I wanted to smash the expensive monitor, permanently delete the email, and actively burn down the server it was routed through. My fingers flew across the mechanical keyboard. I hit reply and started typing a vicious, expletive-filled, deeply insulting response telling them exactly where they could shove their invitation. Callum walked into my spacious corner office at that exact moment, holding 2 steaming cups of expensive black coffee. He took one sharp look at my pale, furious face, the tight set of my jaw, and the violent shaking in my hands, and calmly set the cups down on my glass desk. "What is it?" he asked, his voice calm, steady, and grounding. I turned the large monitor toward him, my chest heaving. "They want me to come watch the golden child get crowned. After 5 years of treating me like roadkill, they want me to come clap for Sutton." Callum leaned in and read the email carefully. His seasoned military eyes narrowed. He didn't see petty family drama. His brain was wired to see a tactical threat vector. In the intelligence world, Maeve, timing is absolutely everything. Look at the date. Why now? Why exactly at the 5-year mark to the very month you were kicked out? This isn't a sudden olive branch of peace. This is a highly calculated tactical maneuver. Do not reply. Do not show emotion. Let me make some calls to our investigative contacts. I trusted Callum with my life and my business. I deleted my angry draft and let him take the wheel. He immediately hired one of the most ruthless, brilliant, and discreet corporate financial investigators in the city to quietly dig deep into the Vance family's current financial and legal situation. 2 days later, Callum walked back into my office, closed the heavy glass door, and locked it behind him. He walked over and dropped a thick, heavy manila folder directly onto the center of my desk. The slapping sound it made was heavy. Ominous. "They don't want you back, Maeve," Callum said quietly, taking a seat across from me. "They want your money." I looked at him, completely and utterly confused, my brow furrowing. "My money?" "Callum, they don't know I have a single dime. I've kept my name off the public corporate registry. As far as they know, I'm still washing trucks or living in a shelter. Not your current corporate money, Maeve. Your grandmother's money." He opened the thick folder and laid out a series of highlighted legal documents and financial trusts. My maternal grandmother had passed away when I was 16. I loved her deeply. She was the only person who ever encouraged my love for computers. But I was told by Gideon that she had left her entire estate directly to my parents. That, it turns out, was a massive, calculated lie. "She set up a highly specific, protected trust fund just for you," Callum explained, tapping a complex, multi-page legal document with his pen. $2.5 million. It was legally designed to unlock and transfer to you on your 20th birthday. But your father, acting as the executor of the estate, found a vicious legal loophole buried in the fine print. An abandonment clause. My blood ran absolutely cold. The air in the room felt incredibly thin. "A what?" If the beneficiary, which is you, voluntarily severs all ties with the family and aggressively rejects all documented attempts at contact for a continuous, unbroken period of exactly 5 years, the trust is legally forfeited. It is then absorbed entirely into the siblings' trust, which means Sutton gets all $2.5 million. I felt physically sick to my stomach. My head spun. The sheer, breathtaking cruelty was staggering. They hadn't just kicked me out in a fit of rage. They had set a financial timer. They threw me out into a blizzard, knowing perfectly well that if they could just hold out and ignore me for 5 years, they would legally steal my inheritance from the only woman who loved me. And this party invitation? I whispered, pointing a shaking finger at the screen. Callum nodded grimly. It's the final trap. It's their documented, good-faith effort to reach out to you. If you ignore it, or if you send that angry reply telling them to go to hell, they simply print that out, take it to an estate judge next week, and say, "Look, Your Honor, we tried our best, but she hates us and refuses contact. Please transfer the money to Sutton." You lose absolutely everything. But why go through all the trouble and risk a lawsuit? I asked, my voice rising in angry confusion. Gideon is loaded. He has millions in real estate. Callum flipped to the very next page in the file. A heavily redacted, confidential financial audit. Not anymore. Gideon's real estate firm made catastrophic, highly leveraged investments in commercial properties 3 years ago. He is secretly, desperately drowning in toxic debt. The banks are circling like sharks. He is literally months away from filing for total Chapter 11 bankruptcy. And Sutton? She's maxed out 6 different high-limit credit cards trying to maintain the desperate illusion of a wealthy socialite to impress her new law firm. She's hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt. They're absolutely desperate, Maeve. They need that $2.5 million to survive the year. They need your blood to keep the parasite alive. The initial shock faded, rapidly leaving behind something entirely different. A cold, absolute, and terrifying clarity washed over my brain. I looked down at the financial ruins of the people who had tried to destroy me. They honestly thought I was still a helpless, broken victim. They thought they were playing a simple game of chess against a weak pawn. They didn't realize they had just invited a heavily armed queen directly into their house. "I'm going to the party," I said, my voice eerily calm, my eyes locked on the documents. Callum smiled. A slow, dangerous, wolf-like smile. "Then we better armor you up for war." I wasn't just going to show up and make a scene. I was going to systematically tear their entire world down, brick by miserable brick. But first, I needed leverage. And the universe, it seemed, had a very twisted, highly ironic sense of humor. The next 4 days were an intense, sleepless masterclass in strategic, cold-blooded preparation. I wasn't an emotional, traumatized daughter seeking validation anymore. I was a ruthless CEO actively preparing for a hostile, scorched-earth takeover. Callum and our team of top-tier corporate lawyers drafted a terrifying, airtight arsenal of legal documents. We prepared a brutal cease and desist order that carried the threat of massive financial ruin, a legally binding relinquishment of Gideon's guardianship over the trust, and a formal demand for an immediate, forensic audit of my father's handling of the estate for the past 5 years. But as Callum always taught me, legal paper is just paper until you hold a knife to someone's throat. I needed to catch them in the absolute act of fraud. I needed undeniable, court-admissible proof of their malicious intent. I reached into my personal office safe and pulled out a tactical, high-end digital audio recorder. It was disguised to look exactly like an expensive, heavy Montblanc fountain pen. It was a marvel of espionage technology. It could easily pick up a whispered conversation in a crowded, noisy room, actively filtering out background music to deliver crystal-clear, forensic-grade audio. I slipped it into the sleek inner pocket of my custom-tailored suit jacket. I stood up and looked at myself in the full-length mirror in my office. The terrified, freezing girl who cried in the snow outside a diner was permanently gone. The woman staring back at me was an apex predator, calm, wealthy, and ready for blood. Then, exactly 24 hours before the graduation party, fate handed me the ultimate, universe-shattering weapon. The emergency red phone in Aegis Protocol's Secure Operations Center rang. It was an apocalyptic scenario. A massive, multinational tech conglomerate, valued at over $50 billion, was currently under a highly sophisticated, devastating ransomware attack. The hackers had successfully breached their core servers, encrypting everything, and were demanding $15 million in untraceable cryptocurrency, threatening to permanently wipe out petabytes of proprietary data. Data that included logistics for several major hospital networks in exactly 12 hours. The CEO of that massive conglomerate was a formidable woman named Phaedra. She was an absolute legend in the global business world, a ruthless, brilliant, self-made visionary who commanded deep respect and immense fear from politicians and billionaires alike. Callum and I locked ourselves in the freezing, hyper-cooled server room. For 12 agonizing, adrenaline-fueled hours, I waged a brutal digital war. I traced the hackers' lateral movements through Phaedra's massive network, built a custom, aggressive containment protocol on the fly, and systematically isolated the infected nodes one by one. Using every ounce of my genius, I reverse-engineered their complex encryption key with barely 45 minutes left on the countdown clock. By sunrise, the threat was completely neutralized, the hackers were locked out, and not a single byte of critical data was lost. Phaedra was on the secure video call with us, looking exhausted, her hair messy, but deeply, profoundly impressed. "Maeve, you and your team just saved my company from an absolute, unmitigated catastrophe," she said, her voice filled with heavy, genuine gratitude. "I owe you a massive, personal debt. Name your price. Anything you want." "I just did my job, Phaedra," I replied smoothly, wiping sweat from my forehead. "The invoice will be our standard, expedited crisis response rate. We don't extort our clients." "Nonsense," she insisted, waving her hand dismissively at the camera. "I take care of people who take care of me. That's how I do business. In fact, I'm stuck attending a dreadful, boring gala tonight for my corporate law firm in your city, but tomorrow, I want to take you to the best lunch in town. My treat. We need to discuss a permanent retainer." I froze. The coffee cup in my hand stopped halfway to my mouth. My highly analytical mind connected the disparate dots with terrifying, lightning speed. A corporate law firm gala. Tonight. In my city. "Phaedra," I asked slowly, trying incredibly hard to keep my voice even and hide the sudden spike in my heart rate. "Which specific law firm?" "Winslow and Associates," she sighed, rolling her eyes. "They're throwing a massive party at the plaza to celebrate some new junior associates passing the bar or something trivial. It's incredibly tedious, but they handle all our major corporate mergers, so I have to make a brief appearance to keep the partners happy." The universe wasn't just blinking at me, it was handing me a loaded, fully automatic weapon and pointing me at the target. Winslow and Associates was the exact, specific firm that had just hired Sutton. The tedious party Phaedra was complaining about attending was my sister's graduation party. The strict, old-school managing partner of Sutton's firm, a terrifying man named Winslow, absolutely worshipped the ground Phaedra walked on. She was, by far, their biggest, most lucrative, most important client. She held the immense power to make or completely break that entire law firm with a single phone call. And she owed me her life's work. The sheer, delicious irony was so sharp I could practically taste blood in my mouth. My family was desperately plotting to steal my money to save themselves from ruin, completely, blissfully unaware that the most powerful, influential person in their entire social and professional orbit was secretly my greatest ally and in my debt. "I'll see you at the party tonight, Phaedra," I said, a slow, incredibly dark, deeply satisfied smile spreading across my face. She looked momentarily confused, then her face broke into a wide smile. "You're going? Excellent. Find me. I'll buy you a drink to celebrate." I hung up the secure call. The pieces were firmly on the board. The trap was perfectly, flawlessly set. My family honestly thought they had invited a weak, desperate victim to a quiet slaughter. They had absolutely no idea they had just invited a Category 5 hurricane. The pieces were in place. The prey was drunk on the illusion of victory. Before we walk into this bloodbath of a party, if you are enjoying this story of ultimate revenge, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment down below with the city you are living in. Every comment helps the video spread to more people. Thank you so much. Now let's go tear the Vance family empire to the ground. The air inside the Plaza Hotel ballroom was aggressively climate-controlled, yet it felt heavy, almost suffocating, as I navigated through the sea of silk and expensive cologne. Every step I took on the plush, imported carpet felt like walking through a highly curated illusion. The Vance family, my family, had spared absolutely no expense to project an image of untouchable wealth. There were towering floral centerpieces of rare white orchids on every table, a live jazz quartet playing in the corner, and waiters circulating with silver trays of caviar and vintage champagne. It was a masterpiece of financial smoke and mirrors. I stood near a massive marble pillar, a silent observer in my bespoke black suit, nursing a glass of sparkling water. I was entirely invisible to them. The people in this room were conditioned to look for obvious markers of status, flashy jewelry, loud designer logos, or the manic, desperate energy of someone trying to network their way up the social ladder. I possessed none of those things. I radiated the quiet, immovable stillness of someone who already owned the ladder. My eyes tracked the room, analyzing the crowd like a complex network schematic. I saw Gideon laughing too loudly, slapping the backs of men he secretly despised. I saw Cressida air-kissing women she regularly tore apart in private. And I saw Sutton. She was holding a crystal flute of champagne, her knuckles entirely white, gripping the glass so tightly I thought it might shatter. Her smile was incredibly wide, but her eyes were darting around the room with a frantic, unhinged energy. The golden child looked less like a triumphant queen and more like a terrified hostage. Before I could analyze her behavior further, a sharp, incredibly nasal voice cut through the soft jazz. Well, well, well. Look what the cat dragged in from the gutter. I didn't even flinch. I slowly turned my head. Standing 2 feet away was Ainsley, my older cousin. She was wearing a violently pink dress that looked like it belonged on a teenager, her neck heavy with pearls. Ainsley was the ultimate flying monkey for my parents. She had spent her entire miserable life orbiting Gideon and Cressida, acting as their loyal spy and eagerly participating in the daily humiliation of Maeve Vance just to secure her own invitation to their parties. My goodness, Maeve, Ainsley sneered, her eyes raking up and down my tailored suit with blatant disgust. You actually showed up. I thought for sure you'd be too embarrassed to show your face here. I mean, look at you. Did you find that suit at a thrift store? You should have told Aunt Cressida you were coming. She probably could have lent you something from last season, so you wouldn't humiliate Sutton on her big night. I took a slow, measured sip of my water. I didn't feel the old, familiar sting of shame that used to paralyze me whenever Ainsley spoke. Instead, I felt like a scientist observing a particularly annoying, predictable insect. Hello, Ainsley, I said, my voice completely flat, devoid of any emotional inflection. She leaned in closer, dropping her voice to a conspiratorial, venomous whisper. Seriously, Maeve, what are you doing here? Uncle Gideon told everyone you were struggling out in the Midwest doing data entry or something pathetic. Are you here to beg for a handout? Because I can tell you right now, Sutton is about to be a highly paid associate at Winslow and Associates. She is untouchable. Don't you dare ruin this night for her with your depressing poverty sob stories. I looked at her, truly looked at her. I saw the desperate need for approval swimming in her eyes. I saw a woman who was a slave to a family that didn't even respect her. I didn't argue. I didn't defend my suit, which cost more than her entire wardrobe. I didn't tell her that my company's quarterly tax bill was larger than Gideon's entire net worth. That wasn't the play. I'm just here to witness the truth, Ainsley, I replied smoothly, giving her a completely blank, chilling smile. Ainsley blinked, visibly unsettled by my lack of reaction. Usually, by this point, I would be stammering, shrinking, or running away in tears. My icy calm threw her off balance. She scoffed loudly, flipping her hair. Whatever. Just stay in the corner. We have very important people here tonight. She spun around on her heels and marched back toward the buffet, eager to report to Cressida that the disgusting Leech had arrived and was properly put in her place. I let out a slow, steady breath. They honestly thought I was the exact same terrified turtle hiding in my shell from 5 years ago. They had absolutely no idea that the shell had hardened into titanium. I checked my watch. The timeline was progressing perfectly. I looked back toward the center of the room, just in time to see Sutton aggressively downing her second glass of champagne in under a minute. A waiter offered her a third, which she snatched instantly. She looked pale beneath her expensive makeup. She checked her phone, her face contorting into a mask of pure panic. She whispered something urgently to Cressida, who grabbed Sutton's arm tightly, her nails digging into her daughter's skin. Cressida nodded toward a set of heavy, velvet-draped doors that led to a private VIP antechamber and the luxury restrooms. The prey was separating from the herd. I set my water glass down on a passing waiter's tray. It was time. My hand reached into my jacket, my thumb finding the smooth, cool metal of the Montblanc pen. I clicked the top button twice. The tiny, microscopic red light blinked once, signaling that the forensic-grade audio recording had officially begun. I stepped away from the marble pillar and followed them into the shadows like a ghost. The hallway leading to the VIP antechamber was heavily soundproofed. The loud, chaotic noise of the jazz band and the clinking glasses faded into a muted, dull hum as I slipped through the heavy velvet curtains. The corridor was dimly lit with crystal sconces, lined with expensive oil paintings. I moved with complete silence, the soft soles of my custom leather shoes making absolutely no sound on the thick carpet. I stopped just outside the slightly ajar door of the private lounge. The heavy oak door was cracked open by barely an inch, but it was enough. I leaned against the wall, perfectly hidden in the shadows, holding my breath. The audio recorder in my pocket was positioned perfectly to capture every single syllable. Inside the room, the golden facade of the Vance family was violently collapsing. "I can't do this, Mom. I'm going to throw up. I literally can't breathe." Sutton was hyperventilating, her voice a shrill, terrified shriek. I could hear the rapid pacing of her high heels clicking frantically on the marble floor of the lounge. "Keep your voice down, Sutton. For the love of God, pull yourself together." Cressida hissed, her tone completely devoid of the sweet, maternal pride she had been projecting to the crowd just 5 minutes ago. Her voice was sharp, desperate, and vicious. "How am I supposed to pull myself together?" Sutton sobbed loudly. "The credit card companies called my office today, Mom. My actual office. They threatened to garnish my wages before I've even collected my first paycheck. I am exactly $200,000 in debt. If Mr. Winslow finds out that his shiny new associate is a massive financial liability who is actively defaulting on 6 different luxury credit cards, he won't just fire me, he'll blacklist me from every corporate firm in the city. I will be ruined." My eyes widened slightly in the dark hallway. $200,000. Sutton had burned through a fortune on designer clothes, luxury vacations, and expensive dinners just to maintain the incredibly fake illusion that she belonged in this elite world. "Stop crying, it makes your face puffy," Cressida snapped coldly. "You are not going to be ruined. We have a plan. Gideon has the paperwork in his briefcase." "Did Ainsley confirm that the little rat actually showed up?" "Yes," Sutton cried. "She said Maeve is standing in the corner looking like a homeless person in a cheap suit." "Mom, what if she doesn't sign it? What if she asks a lawyer to read it?" "She is not going to ask a lawyer, Sutton." Cressida growled, the utter contempt dripping from her words. "She is stupid and desperate. She's been washing trucks and sleeping in shelters for 5 years. We are going to isolate her after Gideon's speech. I will cry. I will tell her we are so sorry, that we want to welcome her back into the family. Gideon will tell her that we are finally selling the old summer cabin, and we just need her signature on a standard, boring property waiver to clear the deed. We'll give her a check for $5,000 to make her feel rich, and she will sign it without even blinking." "But what if she reads the fine print?" Sutton panicked. "What if she sees the words, trust fund relinquishment? What if she realizes the document actually transfers all $2.5 million from Grandma's account directly into my name? She won't read it, Cressida said, slapping her hand hard on a wooden table. We won't give her the time. And we have to do this tonight. Gideon's real estate holding company is officially defaulting on Monday morning. The bank is going to seize this house, the cars, everything. We are completely bankrupt, Sutton. If we don't secure that $2.5 million tonight, your father is going to prison for tax fraud, and you will be working at a coffee shop for the rest of your life. I stood in the hallway, the blood roaring in my ears, completely paralyzed not by fear, but by the sheer, unadulterated scale of their evil. It wasn't just a casual theft. It was a highly orchestrated, desperate, malicious conspiracy. They were planning to emotionally manipulate me, fake an apology after 5 years of torturous silence, throw me a pathetic $5,000 bone, and steal millions of dollars just to cover up their own catastrophic failures and massive, illegal debts. We need that money, Maeve's money, to save this family, Cressida whispered, her voice dropping into a dark, terrifying register. So you're going to walk out there, you're going to smile at the partners, and you're going to act like the wealthy, successful lawyer we paid for you to be. And then, we are going to gut your sister and finally be done with her forever. Understand? Yes, Mom, Sutton sniffled, her breathing finally slowing down. Now fix your makeup. You look like a mess. I reached into my pocket. Click. Click. The tiny red light on the Montblanc pen turned off. The recording was saved to the encrypted internal drive. I had it. I had the complete, uncut confession. $200,000 in credit card debt. Massive corporate tax fraud. Imminent bankruptcy. The entire fraudulent plot to steal the trust fund, fully admitted and detailed in their own voices. I didn't smile. I didn't feel a rush of adrenaline. I felt entirely made of ice. I turned silently, slipping back out through the velvet curtains and into the loud, bright chaos of the ballroom. I smoothed the lapels of my bespoke suit. The trap had been sprung. The prey had voluntarily locked themselves inside the cage. I walked back into the center of the ballroom, just as the loud, sharp sound of a silver spoon clinking against a crystal champagne glass echoed through the massive room. My father was standing on the elevated stage in the center of the room. The spotlight hit him, illuminating his fake, jovial smile. The crowd quieted down, turning their attention to the patriarch of the Vance family. But what Gideon didn't know was that his carefully constructed narrative was about to violently collide with reality, and the VIP guest of honor had just walked through the front doors. The ballroom fell into a respectful, attentive silence as Gideon leaned into the microphone. He looked incredibly polished, playing the role of the proud, wealthy father to absolute perfection. Nobody in this room, aside from me and the 2 women currently repairing their makeup in the bathroom, knew that the man on the stage was a desperate, cornered animal, drowning in debt and facing federal tax fraud charges by Monday morning. Friends, esteemed colleagues, and distinguished partners of Winslow and Associates, Gideon began, his voice a smooth, booming baritone that resonated through the speakers. Thank you all for gathering here tonight to celebrate a truly monumental occasion. We are here to honor my brilliant daughter, Sutton Vance, as she graduates from law school and begins her journey as an associate at one of the most prestigious corporate firms in this beautiful country. The crowd erupted into polite, wealthy applause. Sutton, having just emerged from the hallway looking perfectly composed and completely fake, gave a modest, practiced wave from the front row. Excellence, dedication, and a relentless, unwavering pursuit of success, Gideon continued, placing a dramatic hand over his heart. These are the core values of the Vance family. We raise leaders. We raise winners. Sutton embodies everything we stand for. She has never, not once, disappointed us. He paused, letting the heavy, sycophantic praise settle over the crowd. Then, right on cue, he adopted a look of profound, theatrical sadness. He lowered his voice, making it sound thick with fabricated emotion. Of course, many of you who have known our family for years have asked about my other daughter, Maeve. The room went uncomfortably still. Ainsley, standing near the buffet, shot me a vicious, mocking smirk. It breaks my heart to say this. Gideon sighed deeply, shaking his head. But unfortunately, Maeve could not be here tonight. She chose a very different path. She is currently struggling out in the Midwest, working a menial clerical job. We have tried for 5 years to offer her our financial help, our love, and our resources, but she vehemently refuses. It is a tragedy, but we must respect her choice to distance herself. We can only pray she finds her way. But tonight is not about tragedy. Tonight is about triumph. To Sutton. To Sutton. The crowd echoed blindly, raising their expensive glasses. The sheer audacity of the lie was breathtaking. He had just publicly framed my 5 years of agonizing survival and massive success as a pathetic, chosen failure, painting himself as the loving, rejected savior. He was laying the public groundwork for the trust fund theft, creating a room full of wealthy witnesses who would testify that Gideon Vance was a grieving father whose daughter had completely abandoned the family. I stood completely still, watching the performance. I didn't shout. I didn't interrupt. I let him dig the grave as deep as he possibly could. Because right at that exact moment, the massive, towering oak doors at the back of the ballroom were thrown violently open. The sudden noise caused dozens of heads to turn. Standing in the doorway, flanked by 2 massive, stone-faced private security guards, was Phaedra. She did not look like she was here to party. She was wearing a sharp, incredibly intimidating crimson power suit, her silver hair pulled back into a severe, elegant twist. She radiated an aura of pure, unadulterated power and terrifying authority. The air in the room instantly changed. This wasn't local, country club money. This was global, $50 billion, world-shifting power. Instantly, the atmosphere shifted from relaxed celebration to high-alert panic. Mr. Winslow, the terrifying, old-school managing partner of Sutton's new law firm, practically tripped over his own feet as he scrambled away from the bar, his face turning bright red as he rushed to greet his most important client. Phaedra. What an absolute honor. Winslow gasped, practically bowing as he approached her. We didn't know you would be arriving so soon. Please, let me get you a drink. Let me introduce you to the new associates we have. Phaedra completely ignored him. She didn't even look at Winslow. She raised one hand, silencing the incredibly powerful lawyer as if he were an annoying child. Her sharp, calculating eyes scanned the massive, crowded ballroom. Gideon, still standing on the stage, looked entirely confused. He clearly had no idea who this woman was, but he recognized the terrifying display of power. Phaedra's eyes locked onto me, standing quietly near the pillar. Her stern face instantly broke into a massive, genuine, radiant smile. She completely bypassed the stuttering Mr. Winslow, bypassed the wealthy investors, and walked straight across the polished marble floor toward me. The crowd instinctively parted for her like the Red Sea. Maeve. Phaedra called out, her voice loud, clear, and ringing with absolute respect. Every single head in the room swiveled toward me. The invisible girl was suddenly caught in the blinding spotlight. Phaedra marched right up to me and, to the absolute, collective shock of everyone in the room, pulled me into a tight, incredibly warm embrace. Thank God you're here, Phaedra said loudly, pulling back and gripping my shoulders. I was worried you'd be too exhausted after pulling that 12-hour miracle last night. I smiled, a genuine, relaxed smile. It takes more than a global ransomware attack to keep me down, Phaedra. Phaedra laughed, a rich, booming sound. She turned to Mr. Winslow, who had scurried after her like a lost puppy, his jaw practically hitting the floor. Winslow, Phaedra commanded, gesturing toward me. You are looking at the absolute smartest, most brilliant mind in the entire country. Do you know who this is? Winslow blinked rapidly, looking at my bespoke suit, completely bewildered. I apologize, Phaedra, I don't believe we've been introduced. This is Maeve Vance, Phaedra announced to the entire, dead-silent ballroom. The CEO and founder of Aegis Protocol. The name of my company dropped into the room like a live hand grenade. In corporate circles, Aegis Protocol was legendary. Phaedra didn't stop. She raised her voice, making sure every single person, especially the man standing frozen on the stage, heard her clearly. She is the genius who personally saved my $50 billion company from a total catastrophic wipeout last night. She is the top cybersecurity architect on the East Coast. Her company is pulling in over $30 million a year, and I am personally putting her on a 7-figure retainer starting tomorrow. If your law firm ever needs their network secured, Winslow, you beg this woman to take your money. The silence that followed was not just quiet, it was a physical, crushing weight. It was a vacuum that sucked all the oxygen completely out of the room. I could hear the faint, rapid sound of someone hyperventilating. It was Sutton. My father stood on the stage, the microphone dropping from his hand and hitting the wooden floor with a deafening screech of feedback. He stared at me, his eyes wide, his brain violently short-circuiting as it tried to process the impossible, world-shattering words he had just heard. CEO? $30 million? Saved a $50 billion company? He looked at my suit. He looked at my calm, terrifying posture. He looked at the most powerful woman in the room treating me like an equal. His carefully constructed narrative of the struggling, pathetic failure in the Midwest evaporated instantly, exposing him as a massive, absolute liar in front of the most important people in his life. Cressida's perfectly lipsticked mouth fell wide open. A tiny, pathetic, choking sound escaped her throat. She gripped the edge of a table, her knuckles turning white, looking as though she was about to physically faint. Sutton looked like she had been violently struck by lightning. Her eyes were wide with a dawning, absolute horror as she looked from me to her boss, Mr. Winslow, who was currently staring at me with deep, profound awe. But that's impossible, Gideon stammered into the dead air, his voice cracking, completely forgetting he was in a room full of people. She washes trucks. She's a dropout. Phaedra turned slowly, her eyes locking onto my father on the stage. Her expression turned to pure, terrifying ice. A dropout? Phaedra repeated, her voice dripping with lethal corporate menace. I don't know who you are, sir, but you are speaking about a woman holding a master-level cyber certification who holds 3 global patents. I suggest you watch your tone before you embarrass yourself further. Gideon opened his mouth, but no sound came out. The glass castle had shattered, and I was holding the sledgehammer. The sheer, catastrophic implosion of the Vance family's public image happened in slow motion. The polite, wealthy guests who had been blindly applauding Gideon minutes before were now intensely whispering, their eyes darting rapidly between my father's pale, sweating face and my calm, unbothered posture. The social currency my parents had spent 5 years ruthlessly building was currently going up in spectacular flames right in front of their eyes. Gideon's survival instinct, honed by decades of corporate manipulation, finally kicked in. He realized he was standing on a stage, completely exposed as a liar. He desperately tried to forcefully pivot, to somehow claim my massive success as a victory for the family. He scrambled off the stage, practically sprinting across the ballroom floor toward me. His face was flushed red, and he stretched his arms wide, forcing a manic, desperate smile that didn't reach his terrified eyes. Maeve, my incredible daughter, Gideon shouted, his voice cracking horribly. Why didn't you tell us? You had all this incredible success from us. We thought you were struggling. Oh, we are so incredibly proud of you. Everyone, this is my daughter. He reached out to hug me, hoping to create a picture of family unity for the confused crowd. I didn't step back. I didn't shrink. I simply raised one hand and placed it flat against his chest, stopping him dead in his tracks. The physical rejection was incredibly loud in the silent room. Do not touch me, Gideon, I said, my voice low, cold, and entirely lethal. His desperate smile faltered, turning into a look of panicked rage. Maeve, please, he hissed under his breath, leaning in close so only I could hear. Stop this. Don't cause a scene in front of Winslow. We can talk about this at home. Just play along. Play along? I asked, my voice returning to a normal volume, carrying perfectly through the quiet room. Play along with what? With the lie you just told this entire room that you've tried to help me for 5 years? Or should we play along with the real reason you invited me here tonight? Cressida rushed forward, grabbing Gideon's arm, her eyes wild with panic. Maeve, sweetie, you're confused. You're emotional. Let's go into the private lounge. We have a beautiful surprise for you. We just need to go over some quick family paperwork, a property waiver for the old summer cabin. I interrupted, raising an eyebrow. Is that the surprise, Cressida? My mother froze entirely. All the blood drained from her face, leaving her looking like a terrified corpse. Sutton, standing a few feet away, let out a sharp, audible gasp, covering her mouth with her hands. How did you know about the cabin? Gideon stammered, his eyes darting frantically around the room. I didn't answer him. Instead, I calmly reached into the inner pocket of my bespoke suit jacket. I pulled out the sleek, heavy Montblanc pen. I held it up between my thumb and forefinger for the entire room to see. I don't wash trucks anymore, Gideon, I said loudly, addressing not just him, but the entire room of investors and lawyers. I run a highly advanced cybersecurity and intelligence firm, which means I am very, very good at gathering data. And this pen is actually a forensic-grade digital audio recorder. The collective gasp from the crowd was a beautiful sound. Mr. Winslow took a step back, his lawyer instincts instantly recognizing the presence of hard evidence. I pressed the small button on the side of the pen. The device was synced to the highly secure smartphone in my pocket, which I had secretly paired with the ballroom's massive Bluetooth sound system the moment I walked in. I hit play. Suddenly, the crystal-clear, digitally enhanced audio of the conversation from the VIP lounge blasted through the massive speakers, echoing off the chandeliers. I am exactly $200,000 in debt. If Mr. Winslow finds out, he won't just fire me, he'll blacklist me. Sutton's panicked, shrieking voice filled the room. Mr. Winslow's head snapped violently toward Sutton. His eyes were wide with absolute fury. Corporate law firms do not hire associates with catastrophic, hidden financial liabilities. The audio continued, relentless and completely devastating. She is stupid and desperate. We'll give her a check for $5,000 to make her feel rich, and she will sign it without even blinking. What if she sees the words trust fund relinquishment? What if she realizes the document actually transfers all $2.5 million from Grandma's account directly into my name? The crowd began to murmur in genuine horror. This wasn't just a family argument, they were listening to a premeditated, highly illegal conspiracy to commit massive financial fraud. Gideon's real estate holding company is officially defaulting on Monday morning. The bank is going to seize this house, the cars, everything. We are completely bankrupt, Sutton. If we don't secure that $2.5 million tonight, your father is going to prison for tax fraud. I hit the button again. The audio cut off, plunging the ballroom back into a stunned, horrified silence. The Vance family was completely, utterly exposed. They were standing naked in the center of the room they had rented to show off their fake wealth. My father was shaking uncontrollably, his mouth opening and closing like a suffocating fish. He looked around the room, making eye contact with his investors, the bankers he owed money to, the people he had lied to for years. They were all staring at him with deep, unadulterated disgust. His empire was officially dead. Cressida collapsed into a chair, putting her head between her knees, hyperventilating violently. And Sutton, the golden child. She was staring at her boss, Mr. Winslow, tears completely ruining her expensive makeup, leaving black tracks down her pale face. Mr. Winslow, I can explain, Sutton sobbed, taking a desperate step toward the managing partner. Please, it's out of context. It's just family drama. Do not speak to me, Ms. Vance, Mr. Winslow barked, his voice cracking like a heavy whip. The chaos had been fully unleashed. The bomb had detonated. And I was standing perfectly untouched in the center of the blast radius, watching the dust settle on the ruins of my abusers. The fallout was instantaneous, brutal, and completely unforgiving. Mr. Winslow, a man whose entire career and firm were built on absolute, unshakable integrity and financial transparency, stepped forward. He completely ignored Gideon and focused his terrifying, cold fury entirely on Sutton. $200,000 in hidden debt? Winslow demanded, his voice shaking with pure professional rage. A conspiracy to commit a $2.5 million felony fraud against your own sister? You plan to use my firm's celebration as a cover for a criminal act? Mr. Winslow, please, I didn't want to. Sutton wailed, falling to her knees on the marble floor, her expensive white dress pooling around her. My parents forced me. I have the debt, but the fraud was their idea. I'll pay it back, I promise. Please don't take my job. She threw her own parents under the bus without a single second of hesitation. The golden child was finally showing her true, desperate colors. You don't have a job to take, Miss Vance, Winslow stated with chilling finality. Your employment offer is permanently revoked, effective immediately. Furthermore, I am ethically obligated by the Bar Association to report this incident and the existence of this recording. You will never practice corporate law in this city. Get out of my sight. Sutton let out a guttural, agonizing scream of pure defeat. Her entire future, everything she had been groomed for, was instantly vaporized. Gideon, driven completely mad by the public destruction of his daughter, his wealth, and his reputation, snapped. His face contorted into a mask of pure violence. He lunged toward me, his hands raised, aiming for my throat. You little bitch, he roared. You ruined everything. He never made it past 2 steps. Phaedra's 2 massive private security guards moved with terrifying speed. One grabbed Gideon's arm, twisting it painfully behind his back, while the other forced him to his knees right in front of me. Gideon grunted in pain, struggling helplessly against the trained professionals. Touch her, and I will personally see to it that you spend the rest of your miserable life in a federal penitentiary, Phaedra said, her voice dropping into a deadly whisper. I looked down at the man who had smashed my laptop and thrown me into a blizzard. He didn't look scary anymore. He looked incredibly small. Pathetic. I'm not the one who ruined you, Gideon, I said calmly, looking down into his wild, furious eyes. Your greed, your massive ego, and your disgusting lies ruined you. I just provided the audience. I turned to Mr. Winslow, who was currently furiously texting on his phone, likely mobilizing his firm's PR team to distance themselves from the Vance family immediately. Mr. Winslow, I said, keeping my tone perfectly professional. I have a team of corporate lawyers waiting on standby. I also have a fully drafted cease and desist order and a legally binding document relinquishing Gideon's executorship over my grandmother's trust. Winslow looked up, his eyes sharp. You want them to sign it right now? I nodded. Under the threat of immediately handing this recording over to the district attorney for conspiracy and federal tax fraud charges. Winslow didn't hesitate. He was a shark, and he recognized a flawless legal checkmate when he saw one. He snapped his fingers at one of the junior partners standing nearby. Print those documents from Ms. Vance's lawyers. Bring them here immediately. Within 10 minutes, the festive ballroom had transformed into a grim, terrifying legal execution chamber. The guests had backed away, forming a wide circle of morbid curiosity. A waiter hastily cleared a table of champagne flutes, and the thick stack of legal documents was placed on the damp tablecloth. Gideon, still being physically restrained by Phaedra's guards, was forced into a chair. Cressida, sobbing uncontrollably and shaking like a leaf, was led to the chair next to him. Sign them, I commanded, sliding a heavy metal pen across the table. Sign over the trust. Relinquish all rights. Sign the non-disclosure agreement. And sign the confession of intent. We can't, Cressida wept, looking at me with terrified, begging eyes. Maeve, please, if we don't have that money, the bank takes the house on Monday. We will be homeless. We will have absolutely nothing. You are our daughter. Have some mercy. I leaned down, placing both my hands flat on the table, bringing my face inches from hers. I looked deeply into her tear-filled eyes, searching for any trace of the mother I used to desperately want. There was nothing there. Just fear of poverty. You threw your daughter out into a freezing blizzard with $14 in her pocket, I whispered, my voice cold as the grave. You called me a disgusting leech. You told me I was nothing. Well, Cressida, you are about to find out exactly how cold it gets out there. Sign the papers. Or you leave this hotel in handcuffs. Gideon looked at the terrifyingly calm expression on my face. He looked at Phaedra, who nodded slowly, confirming she would absolutely destroy him. He looked at the documents. With a violently trembling hand, defeated, broken, and publicly humiliated, Gideon Vance signed his name. Cressida, weeping so hard she could barely see the lines, signed hers. I picked up the documents, checking the signatures. The $2.5 million was officially, legally mine. I turned my back on them. I walked out of the ballroom, flanked by Phaedra, the crowd parting silently to let us through. I didn't look back at the ruins of the Vance family. I didn't need to. The war was officially over. And I had won. 6 months later, I stood in my massive, glass-walled corner office at Aegis Protocol headquarters, holding a cup of hot, expensive coffee, looking out over the sprawling, beautiful city skyline. The morning sun was reflecting off the skyscrapers, casting a warm, golden glow over the world I had fought so brutally hard to conquer. A lot can happen in 6 months. The $2.5 million from my grandmother's trust had successfully cleared into my private accounts weeks ago. I didn't spend a single dime of it on myself. Instead, I established the Martha Vance Foundation, completely bypassing my parents' tainted legacy. The foundation was designed specifically to provide massive, full-ride scholarships, top-tier laptops, and living stipends to brilliant, underprivileged young women who wanted to study computer science and cybersecurity but lacked the family support to do so. I was building an army of women exactly like the girl I used to be. Callum walked into my office, dropping a stack of new, lucrative corporate contracts onto my desk. We were officially expanding overseas. You look incredibly happy today, boss, Callum smiled, leaning against the doorframe. I took a sip of my coffee. Just enjoying the view, Callum. He chuckled, pulling his phone out of his pocket. Well, this might make the view even better. My investigator just sent over the final update on the Vance situation. You want the details? I turned around, leaning against the cool glass of the window. Let's hear it. It was exactly the spectacular, catastrophic collapse I had predicted. On the Monday following the Plaza Hotel disaster, the banks aggressively foreclosed on Gideon's massive real estate empire. Because of the recording of his confessed tax fraud, the federal authorities heavily audited him. He narrowly avoided prison by liquidating absolutely every single asset he owned, pleading guilty to lesser charges, and paying massive fines. They lost the mansion, the luxury cars, the country club memberships. They were entirely, utterly bankrupt. They currently live in a tiny, cramped, 2-bedroom apartment in a highly undesirable neighborhood on the edge of the city, Callum read from the report. Gideon is working as a mid-level salesman at a used car dealership. Cressida took a job as a receptionist at a local dentist's office. And Sutton? I asked, feeling no pity, only a cold, clinical curiosity. Callum smirked. Blacklisted from every major and minor law firm in the state. She's currently working 40 hours a week as a barista at a chain coffee shop downtown, desperately trying to pay off her $200,000 in credit card debt. Apparently, she has to take the public bus to work. I nodded slowly. The sheer, beautiful irony of it all. The people who called me a worthless leech were now completely drained, forced to live the exact desperate, exhausting life they had mercilessly thrown me into 5 years ago. I didn't feel a sudden rush of vindictive joy. I didn't throw a party. I simply felt an immense, overwhelming sense of absolute closure. The scales of the universe had violently, permanently rebalanced themselves. Later that afternoon, my executive assistant walked in, handing me a cheap, slightly wrinkled envelope. It had been forwarded multiple times from my old addresses. The handwriting was incredibly familiar. It was Cressida's looping, overly dramatic cursive. I sat at my desk, staring at the envelope. 5 years ago, I would have desperately torn it open, praying for an apology, praying for a mother's love. Today, I simply slid a sharp letter opener under the flap. It was a 2-page letter, written on cheap, lined notebook paper. It was not an apology. Narcissists are fundamentally, biologically incapable of genuine accountability. It was a masterpiece of pathetic blame shifting. Dear Maeve, the letter began. We are living in a nightmare. Everything is gone. I hope you are happy with what you did to us. But you have to understand, it wasn't our fault. The economy ruined your father's business. And the things we said to you, we were under so much stress. Your Aunt Ainsley was constantly whispering in our ears, telling us you were a bad influence. We just wanted to protect Sutton. We were desperate. Please, Maeve, you have so much money now. We are your family. We are struggling to buy groceries. Can you please find it in your heart to forgive us and help us out? Just a small loan? I read the letter twice. There was absolutely no mention of the fraud. No mention of throwing me into the snow. Just excuses, blame placed on a ridiculous aunt, and a desperate, pathetic beg for my money. They hadn't changed. They would never, ever change. They were still the exact same parasites, just looking for a new host to latch onto. I didn't feel anger. I just felt profoundly tired of their existence. I stood up, walked over to the heavy-duty industrial paper shredder in the corner of my office, and fed the letter directly into the roaring blades. I watched the excuses and the begging turn into tiny, meaningless strips of confetti. I didn't even bother to write a reply. Silence was the absolute loudest, most devastating answer I could possibly give them. I walked back to my desk and opened a new file of scholarship applications for my foundation. I looked at the essays of brilliant, struggling girls who just needed a single chance. That was where my energy belonged. Not in the past, but in building the future. They called me a disgusting leech, but in the end, I was the only one who learned how to build my own kingdom, while they completely drowned in the toxic swamp of their own making. Sometimes, the absolute greatest, most valuable gift the universe can give you is the brutal, agonizing pain of being discarded, because it violently forces you to realize you are the only person who can save yourself. So, I have to ask you guys, knowing that my actions directly caused my father to lose his business, forced my mother to work a minimum wage job, and completely destroyed my sister's legal career, did I go too far? Did I push them too hard into ruin, or was the utter destruction of their lives exactly the price they deserved to pay for what they did to me? Please let me know your honest thoughts in the comments section below. I read all of them. Thank you so much for listening to my story. If you found yourself nodding along, if you've ever had to cut off toxic family to save your own life, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and share this video with someone who might need to hear it. It helps the channel grow and lets me bring you more crazy stories like this. Stay strong, protect your peace, and I will see you in the next video.